In the third year after we had built our company from the ground up and finally achieved a measure of success, Leo and I had our first argument that felt like it could be our last. He was incandescent with fury, his jaw tight and his finger jabbing the air in my direction as his voice echoed in the cavernous study. "Claire, I don't want to see you again," he shouted, the words hanging between us like a guillotine. I took him at his word and disappeared from his life just as he asked. But when he finally understood that I was truly gone, when every last trace of me had been erased from his world, he seemed to completely unravel. It all started in the study. Leo was yelling, his words a torrent of frustration, his finger pointed accusingly at my face. I, on the other hand, felt a strange and unsettling calm settle over me. I took a slow, deliberate breath and spoke softly into the storm of his anger. "Then let's get divorced." For a second, he looked utterly stunned, as if the concept was so foreign he couldn't process it. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that was somehow more menacing than his shouting. Without saying another word, I reached into the tote bag I had placed on the floor beside my chair. My fingers closed around a set of papers, slightly creased from being carried around with me for days. I had walked through this exact moment in my imagination more times than I could count, practicing my lines and my movements, yet my hands still felt impossibly heavy, as if they were filled with wet sand. I carefully straightened the agreement, my eyes scanning the clauses one last time before I held it out to him. I made a conscious effort to keep my expression neutral, to avoid meeting his gaze because I was afraid he would see right through my composure and into the vulnerable, terrified part of me. "I don't love you anymore," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "Let's get divorced." After all the years we had shared, a peaceful end was the only thing I asked for. I didn't think it was an unreasonable request. Leo stared at me, his eyes boring into mine as if he were trying to see me, truly see me, for the first time in a very long time. The silence in the room grew heavy and suffocating, stretching on for an eternity before he suddenly moved, his hand lashing out and knocking the divorce agreement from my grasp. The papers scattered across the floor. The abruptness of his action sent a wave of dizziness through me, a stark reminder of how fragile my body had become. I swayed on my feet but managed to steady myself against the edge of the desk, refusing to let myself fall. Then his voice cut through the air, sharp and unforgiving. "Claire, you want a divorce? Fine. I'll give you what you want. But the second you walk out that door, don't you ever think about coming back." I pulled myself upright, forcing my lips into a polite, hollow smile. "I hope you won't regret today's decision," I replied. As I expected, his expression hardened even further. After so much time together, we had become experts at knowing exactly where to stick the knife to cause the most pain. As I watched the last flicker of tenderness in his eyes die out, replaced by a cold, hard indifference, I had expected to feel a sense of victory. Instead, it felt as if a giant hand had reached into my chest and was squeezing my heart into a pulp. The pain was a physical, crushing weight. I fought back the wave of emotion and the deep, unsettling discomfort that was spreading through my body. I turned without another word and walked upstairs to pack my things. I only gathered a few changes of clothes. It was all I would need. As I was about to leave the bedroom, I paused at the wall where our wedding photograph still hung. In the picture, we were both beaming, our smiles so bright and genuine it hurt to look at. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would likely never see that particular smile on his face again, at least not directed at me. I'm not sure how long I stood there, lost in the memory of that day. It was only the impatient honk of the taxi I'd called, a sharp and jarring sound from the street below that broke the spell. I gently pulled the bedroom door closed behind me and carried my small suitcase down the stairs. Leo was standing at the bottom, a silent, cold statue. In the past, he never would have let me carry something so heavy. He would have rushed to my side, taking it from my hands while teasing me. "What is my precious wife doing carrying this? Let me get it." But those days were gone now. The sweet memories were artifacts of a life I could no longer access. This time, it was just me. I pretended not to care, walking past him with my luggage and opening the front door without a backward glance. Outside, a light, misty rain had begun to fall, and a gust of wind sent a chill straight through me. I shivered. Just as I was about to step over the threshold, Leo's voice called out my name from behind me. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, a foolish sliver of hope flickering within me. I hoped he might say something, anything, that would make me turn around, that would soften the edges of this impossibly hard decision I had made. But he remained silent. The pause stretched on, thick with unspoken words, and then there was nothing. I took a deep breath, marshaled my remaining strength, and stepped out into the rain, pulling the door closed behind me. A moment later, a loud crashing sound erupted from inside the house, the distinct shatter of glass, like a cup or a plate being thrown against a wall. But I didn't look back. I went back to the first apartment Leo and I had bought together when we were first married. This was long before the company went public, back when we were just a regular couple with more dreams than money. That small, cramped apartment still held the ghosts of our shared memories, and I thought that maybe, just maybe, it could be a place for me to rest and quietly start over. It had been years since either of us had lived there, so I expected it to feel neglected and empty. When I got out of the taxi, the rain was coming down harder. I didn't have an umbrella, so I grabbed my suitcase and made a run for the building's entrance. My clothes were soaked through in seconds, and a dull ache started in my chest from the exertion, but I ignored it. I just wanted to get inside. I took the elevator up to our old floor, found the key I hadn't used in years, and slowly pushed it into the keyhole. But no matter which way I turned it, the lock wouldn't budge. As I stood there, frowning in confusion, the door to the apartment next door creaked open and my old neighbor peered out. "Claire, what are you doing here so late?" she asked, her eyes wide with surprise. "Didn't you and Leo sell this place a while ago?" Her questions came one after another, making my head throb. She must have seen the dazed look on my face because she came over and gently took my arm. "Claire, are you okay? Where's Leo? Or your sister? Maybe I can call her to come get you." The mention of Leo's name jogged something in my memory. Of course. This was the apartment we had taken out a mortgage against when we needed capital to get the business off the ground. My memory seemed to be getting worse and worse lately. I saw my neighbor pull out her phone and start to dial. I quickly reached out and stopped her. "Please don't. He's very busy right now." She gave me a look I'd seen on many faces before, a mixture of pity and disapproval. "You always say that. No matter how busy a man is, he should still have time to take care of his wife. Otherwise, what's the point of having a family?" I offered her a faint smile, but didn't say anything. A cold draft from an open window at the end of the corridor seemed to clear my head a little. I straightened my shoulders and said, "Thank you for your concern. I just forgot something and came back to get it. I'm all done now." Even so, she insisted on walking me back downstairs. I didn't have the energy to argue, so I let her accompany me. When we got to the lobby, I gently persuaded her not to wait with me, telling her I had already called for a car and urging her to go home. As I watched her disappear back up the stairs, I let out a long, weary sigh. I was standing there, wondering where I could possibly go next when my phone rang. It was Leo. It felt like a piece of driftwood appearing in the middle of an endless ocean, and I clung to it. "Claire, what are you doing?" Leo's voice came through the phone, sharp and interrogating. "Why did you go back to the old apartment?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain myself. Before I could form a response, his voice turned impatient. "You're the one who wanted this divorce. Can you please stop dragging me into your personal drama?" "Okay," I whispered, my voice coming out shaky and choked. "It won't happen again." There was silence on the other end of the line. Leo seemed surprised. I had always been the strong one, the one who never showed any vulnerability. I suppose my reaction was unexpected. Then he spoke again, his voice as cold and distant as a faraway star. "Claire, you're the one who said you wanted a divorce. I just granted your wish. Don't start playing the victim now. Who do you think you're fooling?" Hearing the ice in his tone, I ended the call without another word. He was right. This had all been my decision. What right did I have to feel wronged? My emotions felt like a tightening net, constricting around me. Everything that had happened over the past few weeks rushed back into my mind all at once. My chest seized up, my vision began to spin, and then the world went black. When I opened my eyes again, my entire world was white. For a disoriented moment, I thought I might have died and gone to heaven. A nurse standing nearby noticed I was awake and hurried off to find the doctor. A few minutes later, he appeared and shone a small, bright light into my eyes, making my head swim. After his examination, his expression was grave. "Your condition is getting worse," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "We can't say for certain when, but there's a possibility that you could fall into a deep sleep one day and not wake up. I strongly advise you to consider surgery soon. It won't remove the tumor entirely, but if it's successful, it could extend your life." I watched his lips move, his words echoing in my ears as if coming from a great distance. I could barely focus. I shook my head slightly, trying to clear the fog. "I'll think about it," I said softly. He sighed, his concern evident, and left me alone with my thoughts. Just then, my phone rang again. I picked it up with a great deal of effort. It was Leo, but the voice that answered wasn't his. "Leo, what would you like me to make for dinner tonight?" a woman asked, her voice sweet and musical. "Whatever you want," Leo replied, his tone filled with a gentleness I hadn't heard in a very long time. I froze, the phone pressed against my ear. Then, a quiet, humorless laugh escaped my lips. At least when I was gone, Leo wouldn't be lonely. Still, a sour, acidic feeling twisted in my gut. Before I could fully process the feeling, his voice was back on the line, directed at me. "Since you want the divorce so badly, let's meet next Monday morning at the entrance to the courthouse." His words were cold, all business. "All right," I managed to say. He hung up immediately. Suddenly, I remembered the vows he had whispered to me on our wedding day. "I, Leo, swear that in this lifetime there will be no woman but Claire." Just as he was about to state the consequences for breaking that vow, I had placed a finger on his lips and stopped him. Back then, I was so sure we would never need them. When you truly love someone, you can't bear the thought of them suffering, not even a little. I had imagined 1,000 different futures where he and I would grow old together, but reality had a cruel way of proving me wrong. Life, I was learning, is completely unpredictable. After that phone call, my heart felt like a dead piece of wood. I spent my days sitting quietly in the hospital's courtyard, soaking up the weak sunlight. Sometimes I would sit there for the entire day without moving. "Claire, what are you doing out here?" a familiar voice called out. I slowly lifted my head, trying to place the man standing in front of me. His face was familiar, but I couldn't quite attach a name to it. "It's me, Mark," he said with a small, kind smile. "Back in college, Leo and I both had a crush on you." He let out a soft chuckle. "It's a shame he got to you first." He continued to talk, catching me up on his life, but then his tone shifted. "What's wrong with you? Why are you in the hospital? Where's Leo?" His questions came in a rush, but I struggled to find the words to answer. My mind felt sluggish these days, and I could only sit there in silence. Then, as if he had noticed something deeply unsettling, Mark stepped closer and gripped my shoulders. "Claire, is it a brain tumor?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. His face was pale, his expression a mask of disbelief. After a moment, trying to sound hopeful, he added, "Medical science is so advanced now, you're going to get better." I gave a slight nod, my gaze falling to the red plastic wristband on my arm. I was the one who was sick, yet I found myself wanting to comfort him. The thought was so absurd it made me laugh softly. Seeing me laugh, Mark seemed to relax a little. "I just started working at this hospital," he told me. "If you need anything at all, you can find me in the neurology department." "Okay," I replied quietly. For the next several days, Mark visited me often. Leo never came. One day, Mark sat by my bed and asked, "Where is Leo? Why is it always just you here?" "Our company is about to go public," I said, struggling to keep my voice from wavering. "He's been very busy." Mark frowned. "You're in this condition, and he's still focused on work? Does he have any idea what's truly important right now?" "It's all right," I murmured. "I can take care of myself." Before I could finish the sentence, a terrible coughing fit seized me. My whole body shook and I gasped for air. Mark immediately helped me sit up, gently patting my back while muttering curses about Leo under his breath. I couldn't stand to hear him criticize Leo. After some hesitation, I decided to tell Mark everything. Even though he felt like both a stranger and an old friend, I trusted him. When I finished my story, he looked at me with a serious expression. "Claire," he said slowly, "this isn't fair to Leo. He has a right to know the truth. Don't you think?" I didn't respond. My silence was my answer. Mark could only sigh. In the days that followed, he came to see me even more frequently, bringing food and little things he thought I might need. He always spoke to me gently, offering quiet words of encouragement. His presence made my time in the hospital less lonely, but his words echoed in my mind. Was it really right to keep this from Leo? Was it fair for me to make such a monumental decision all by myself? A small voice inside me started to whisper, urging me to tell him. So, one afternoon, I left the hospital without telling anyone. I had made up my mind. I had to see him. If my life was really coming to an end, then he deserved to be by my side. I went straight to his company's office building, my heart filled with a nervous anticipation. But when I stepped into the gleaming lobby, I didn't see a single familiar face. A wave of confusion washed over me. I stood frozen, suddenly unsure of why I'd even come. A few employees walking by noticed me and asked if I needed help, but I politely waved them off. Before I knew it, the flow of people moving through the lobby had pushed me back outside onto the street. I stood there alone, staring up at the towering skyscrapers and the frantic pace of the city. The noise, the motion, the sheer scale of it all was disorienting. My memories began to blur. I no longer knew where I was or why I was there. Then, as if guided by fate, I saw a figure walk past me. He looked so familiar, my heart leaped into my throat. I rushed forward and grabbed his arm. "Leo!" He turned sharply. "Where did this crazy woman come from?" he snapped, shaking my arm off with a look of disgust. I stumbled backward and fell hard onto the pavement, stunned and shaken. A wave of pure fear washed over me and my body went limp. Everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, the world was white again. The hospital ceiling slowly came into focus, and my gaze felt empty and dull. "Claire, would you like to go for a little walk?" a soft voice asked from beside me. "I can go with you if you'd like." I turned my head slowly, trying to find the source of the voice, searching for a familiar face, but I didn't recognize anyone. The disappointment must have been written all over my face because after a pause, the voice spoke again. "I remember how much you used to love small animals back in college," Mark suggested. "We could go take a look together." I didn't answer, but he started gathering my things anyway. He held on to me carefully the entire time we were out, as if he were afraid I might simply vanish. As we stepped into the shopping mall, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure passing by again. Remembering what happened last time, I held myself back. I figured Leo must have been deeply hurt by me and wouldn't want me anywhere near him anymore. When we arrived at the cat cafe and saw all the kittens playing inside, I felt something inside me begin to soften. A quiet ragdoll cat was curled up in a corner, reminding me of how I used to be, silent and alone. I picked it up gently and it nestled into my arms, soft and docile, bringing me a fleeting moment of peace. Then, as I looked up, Leo appeared again. This time, he was holding hands with another woman. The way they looked at each other left no doubt about how close they were. I thought maybe my eyesight was failing me, but the figure kept walking toward me, eventually stopping right in front of us. The scent of his cologne confirmed it. It really was Leo. I had just seen him so intimately close with someone else, and it turned out I wasn't imagining things. It was real. A bitter taste rose in the back of my throat. "Are you divorcing me because of her?" I asked, my voice low. "How did you two even get together?" Before Leo could reply, the woman beside him spoke first. "Leo, since you're already preparing for the divorce, let's just go. Let's not interrupt someone else's private time." I looked up and finally recognized her. Chloe. She was one of Leo's business partners and had always been openly interested in him, but Leo had always rejected her advances. I still remembered the night at a cocktail party when he had held my hand tightly and told her in no uncertain terms, "I'm married." That night, he stayed by my side the entire time and told me, "I want everyone to see how amazing my wife is." Now, thinking back on that moment, It felt like nothing more than a cruel joke. Since I hadn't spoken, Leo looked slightly uncomfortable. He muttered, "Yes, I'm the one disturbing them. Let's go." Mark, who had been quiet beside me, looked upset. "Leo, you're going to regret this. Do you even know that she—" "I'm fine," I interrupted, cutting Mark off before he could say more. I had no desire to explain anything to Leo. Sometimes, hate lasts longer than love. Maybe if he remembers me this way, it would be for the best. I lowered my head to hide the tears that were welling in my eyes. I gently tugged on Mark's sleeve, a silent plea for him not to say anything else. Though he was full of anger and frustration, Mark respected my decision and stayed quiet. Leo noticed the small gesture between us and his tone sharpened again. "What are you two pretending for this time? Claire, since you're so eager, why don't we go get the divorce certificate today? I'll give you your freedom and you can give me mine. How about that?" His words felt like 1,000 tiny needles piercing my heart, but I still tried to respond calmly. I hadn't even realized that tears had started to fall down my cheeks. "Forget it," I said softly. "I'm not free today. Let's do it another day." Seeing my expression, Leo scoffed. His constantly shifting attitude confused me, but at that point, I no longer had the energy to try and figure it out. I quietly motioned to Mark that I wanted to leave. Without hesitation, Mark took my things and led me out of the cafe. As we stepped outside, he said in a low, apologetic voice, "I thought I was doing something good, but I only made things worse." "It's not your fault," I reassured him. "I'm really grateful to have you with me right now. I could never blame you." I smiled gently to show him I meant it. As we walked away, I saw Mark glance behind us with a troubled look on his face. I turned my head to follow his gaze. Not far away, Leo was helping Chloe into his car. He was holding open the passenger door for her, the very seat he had once promised no other woman would ever occupy. The memory sent a sharp pang through my chest, but I forced myself to remain composed. "It's all right not to tell him," Mark said, trying to comfort me. "He doesn't deserve to know." I joked quietly. "Don't look at him like that. If he ever finds out, he'll be the one suffering the most." Surprisingly, Mark said nothing in return. I looked up and saw that Leo and Chloe were already kissing inside the car. My joke felt empty and foolish in that moment. Even I couldn't believe the words I had just spoken. I didn't say anything for the rest of the way back. After Mark helped me get settled, he looked at me with a touch of sadness and said, "Please take care of yourself. Everything will be all right." "I will," I replied, just as I always did. He finally left, looking visibly relieved. I had lost count of how many times he had said those same words to me. If it weren't for my worsening health and increasingly fragmented memory, I might have believed him this time too. I turned down the doctor's suggestion for surgery. I thought to myself that before death came, I didn't want to endure any more suffering. My condition was declining rapidly, and the changes in my appearance often startled the other patients. So, while my mind was still clear, I said goodbye to Mark and moved into the convalescent ward. There were many patients like me in that part of the hospital, and their presence made the days more bearable. But the long, quiet nights were difficult. I would lie awake, my thoughts replaying everything that had happened. And sometimes I would cry silently into my pillow. Since the day of the divorce filing, I hadn't heard from Leo, not even once. Then, one afternoon, as I was sitting quietly in the sun, a call from him came through. His voice sounded matter-of-fact. He said, "I've been busy with the collaboration with Chloe's company. I haven't had time to talk about the divorce." I stayed silent. He continued, explaining why he hadn't reached out sooner. "Forget it," he said finally. "You want a divorce, right? There's a private room on the 3rd floor of the Phoenix restaurant. Come there, the courthouse is right next door." Without waiting for my response, he hung up. The call ended so abruptly it felt as if it had never happened. But it had. And I thought that perhaps it was for the best to just get it over with quickly. I rarely wore makeup, but that day, I did. I wanted to hide the sickly pallor of my face. Then I took a taxi to the address he had given me. When I arrived, he wasn't downstairs. I called him, and he told me to come up to the private room. I hesitated, but eventually I went. I knew Leo too well. If he had arranged for me to come here, there had to be more to it. When I opened the door, I saw Leo sitting there, along with Mark, two elderly people, and a woman I had never seen before. In that moment, I understood what he was trying to do. He believed I wanted to divorce him because of Mark. I walked over to the table and quietly placed a dark gray tie beside him. It was the brand he always wore, something I had just bought. I figured I wouldn't have many more chances to do something like this for him. This would be the last time. After that, I turned to leave. Whether the divorce was finalized today or not, I had no reason to stay any longer. But he stopped me. "Aren't you going to greet your old friends?" he said. The waiter, seeing the tension on his face, quickly stepped out and closed the door behind him. The elderly couple looked at Leo in confusion. One of them asked, "Who is this? Is she also a friend of Mark's? We've never heard Mark mention her before." Leo gave a faint, sarcastic laugh. Then he said, "Claire, is this the new partner you found?" He looked almost unhinged. I looked at him calmly and replied, "This is between you and me. It has nothing to do with Mark." Mark's parents looked even more confused. Mark stood up, unable to hold back any longer. "Leo, with your attitude, she was bound to leave you sooner or later," he said firmly. Mark's words seemed to be the final blow. Leo completely lost control. "My attitude? And what about yours? Let me remind you, she didn't choose you back in college, and she still won't." As the situation spiraled out of control, a wave of intense dizziness hit me. A terrible feeling crept in, and I knew something was very wrong. I quickly turned and walked toward the door. Luckily, it wasn't locked. I pulled it open and rushed out into the corridor. People passing by stared at me with strange expressions. I looked down and suddenly felt a warm wetness on my hand. When I raised it to my face, I saw blood. More and more blood was flowing from my nose, uncontrollably soaking my hand and staining the carpet a vivid, shocking red. The dizziness worsened. Though the floor was flat, I felt as though I was sinking into mud with every step, 1 foot deep, the next shallow. The hallway wavered around me, shifting in and out of focus. I started hallucinating again. I thought I heard Leo shouting my name from behind me. "Claire, stop!" I tried to shake my head to answer him, but no sound came out. It felt like something was lodged in my throat, choking me. The blood kept pouring out. Voices around me began to scream in panic. Everything blurred, faded, and finally went dark. Leo's voice grew clearer and more urgent in my ears. "What are you trying to run from? We haven't even settled everything yet." I reached out blindly, trying to hold on to something to keep myself upright. I couldn't collapse, not in front of him. Leo's anger seemed to rise because of my silence. His voice grew louder. "So this is what you want? To leave me for him? Is that your final decision? Answer me." Finally, he stepped closer. I looked up at him and something in his expression shifted. His rage dissolved into something else entirely, shock and then fear. He looked as if he had just seen a ghost. I wanted to tell him not to be afraid. I wanted to comfort him, but I could feel the warmth spreading across my chest. A large, wet patch blooming over my clothes. My blood wouldn't stop. Was I dying? I raised my hand, trying to touch his face one last time. In this world, he was the one person I could never bear to leave. But he stood still, frozen. Maybe he was still angry. Maybe that was why he didn't move or lean in, even as I struggled to reach him. I stretched my hand toward him again, desperate to close the distance. I wanted to say something, anything, but my mind was blank. Then, he suddenly pulled me into his arms, his whole body trembling. Even in his embrace, he held me so gently, as if he were afraid that touching me might break me. For a moment, I thought, at least he's not pushing me away again. Even if this is just a dream, it's enough. But his arms were shaking violently. I had never seen him look so terrified. His voice cracked, like that of a small child who had done something terribly wrong. "Honey, what's happening to you?" I wanted to answer, but everything faded to black. I hoped it was just a dream. I hoped he had never truly looked so helpless. When I woke up, the first thing I did was glance at the space beside me, but it was empty. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. I must be losing my mind, I thought, still thinking about Leo. Then Mark walked in. It had been a long time since I had last seen him, since the day we said goodbye in the convalescent ward. I was about to tell him about the strange dream I'd had, but he spoke first, his voice low and rough, barely holding back his emotions. "Do you know how much worse your condition has gotten?" he asked quietly. "Do you know how dangerous it was this time?" After saying that, he turned away, unable to meet my eyes. So it hadn't been a dream after all. Realizing the truth, my thoughts turned back to Leo. If I was in such a state, had he forgiven me? I wanted to ask where he was, if he even knew what had really happened. Mark must have read my expression. "He's outside on the phone," he said, sniffling. "Following your wishes, I didn't let the doctors inform him about your condition." "Thank you," I said weakly. "And I'm sorry, I don't know what kind of event I interrupted, but I never meant to cause any trouble." "How could there be anything to hold against you?" he replied gently. "And on behalf of Leo and myself, I hope you won't carry a grudge against him. He's just under a lot of pressure." I looked at Mark with a deep sense of guilt. He had always been so kind, always willing to help, and he didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of our mess again. He saw the apology in my eyes and smiled warmly. "Just focus on getting better, that's all I ask." I smiled faintly in return. Then Leo walked in. He had just finished his phone call. As soon as he saw Mark and me, he stepped forward quickly and placed himself between us, separating us with a tense energy. "Honey, the doctor said you just need to rest. Let's go home together, all right? Let's not get divorced." But Mark interrupted him before he could say anything more. "Claire," he said, turning to me, "have you forgotten what happened between him and that woman?" The memory hit me again. The closeness between Leo and Chloe that day, the intimacy I could never forget. I said nothing. Leo looked straight at me. "I didn't mean it. I was just trying to make you jealous. You know me, honey." His eyes were sincere, almost pleading. My heart, already so tired, began to soften. Leo took me home. Everything was just as I had left it. There were no signs that anyone else had been living there. Under his constant care, the color gradually returned to my face. We seemed to go back to how things were before. In fact, he stayed even closer to me than he ever had. At night, when I fell asleep, I could feel his arms wrapped tightly around me, as if he were terrified of letting me go again. It seemed as though our relationship had been mended, as if we had found our way back to each other. But only I knew the truth. My body was growing weaker by the day. Still, I tried my best to keep up appearances. I made sure to look my best whenever I was around him, hoping that one day, when I was no longer by his side, he would remember me just like this. One evening, trying to sound casual, I suggested, "Why don't we invite Chloe over for dinner? I'll cook." Leo, who was busy with something in the kitchen, paused. His expression froze for a moment before he shook his head and said, "No, I don't want anyone to disturb us." But I gently persisted, and after a moment of hesitation, he reluctantly agreed. We would invite her over the next day. The following morning, I spent extra time on my makeup, carefully choosing my outfit and jewelry. When the doorbell rang, I went downstairs to answer it. Chloe stood on the doorstep with her hands full of gifts. I quickly called for Leo to come and help. She looked at me with a shy expression and said softly, "I'm really sorry about last time. I should have come to apologize sooner." "It was Leo's fault," I replied with a warm smile. "We're the ones who should be apologizing. I hope you won't take it to heart." I took her hand and led her inside, showing her around our home. I had originally planned to cook, but Leo insisted that I rest, worried I would get tired. So I sat and chatted with Chloe while he prepared the meal. Everything during dinner felt peaceful, even joyful. After we ate, while Leo was busy cleaning up in the kitchen, I turned to Chloe and spoke softly. "Chloe, do you still have feelings for Leo?" Her face changed immediately. She waved her hands quickly. "No, please don't misunderstand. Ever since he turned me down that first time, I haven't thought about it again. What happened before was I was just playing along with him, that's all. Seeing how flustered she was, I decided not to beat around the bush any longer. I don't have much time left, I said gently. Confusion crossed her face. She stared at me, unsure if she had heard me correctly. I looked toward the kitchen, where Leo was still humming to himself as he washed the dishes. A soft ache tugged at my chest. I'm sick, I said. The doctor told me I don't have long to live. Leo doesn't know, and I don't want him to find out. Her face turned pale with shock. I placed my hand on hers and continued. If you still care about him, I would be willing to help you. The news left her speechless. When it was time for her to leave, she simply gave me a long, silent hug at the door. She turned to Leo and said earnestly, Leo, please be kind to your wife. He smiled proudly. Of course, she's my wife. Who else would I be kind to? That night, as we lay side by side in bed, he looked at me with a seriousness he rarely showed. Honey, he said, I want to live like this with you forever. I don't care about anything else. I just want to be with you. I smiled and reassured him, like I always did. Since I had left the hospital, he had become more sensitive, more anxious. Perhaps in his heart, he had already sensed something was wrong. The days blurred together. I no longer kept track of time. Then, one day, a message appeared on my phone. It was from Chloe. It said simply, I'm willing. I stared at it for a long moment, then quietly deleted it. Later, I told Leo I wanted to visit the place where we had gotten married. Without a moment's hesitation, he set everything aside and began looking for flight tickets. I held his restless hands and told him I would take care of all the arrangements. As the day of our departure approached, I noticed something strange. My symptoms, the dizziness, the occasional bleeding, had all disappeared. I began to feel stronger, more energetic, like a final flash of brightness before the darkness. I packed his suitcase for the trip. When he saw it was nearly full, he looked at me, half joking and half serious. Honey, are you trying to drive me out of the house? I laughed at his exaggerated pout. Going on a trip is like moving. It's better to bring more than less. The truth was, I didn't know if we would ever get another chance like this, so I packed everything I could think of for him. He hugged me gently. All right, whatever you say, I'll do. At the airport, he was bursting with excitement. Watching him, I felt something hot sting the corner of my eye. I quickly wiped the tear away before he could see. When it was time to board, I finally felt the weight in my heart begin to lift. I told him I needed to use the restroom before we boarded and asked him to go on ahead. But he held on to me, his hand tight around mine, as if he sensed something was wrong. I smiled and whispered, I'll be back in a minute. Then I slowly let go of his hand. He had no choice but to give in. I watched as he walked toward the plane, his figure growing smaller with every step. Once he was on board, I quietly turned away and sent a final message to that familiar number. Then, I stood by the window, my eyes fixed on the runway, and waited. When the plane slowly lifted off the ground, I imagined Leo's usual grumpy expression when things didn't go his way, and without meaning to, I let out a laugh. But the laughter faded quickly, and a sharp pain stabbed through my chest, as though a blade had been sliced clean through it. So this was what it felt like to be replaced, so suddenly and so easily. My knees went weak, and it felt as if all the strength had drained from my body. My breath came in quick, shallow gasps. Someone reached a hand out toward me. I tried to grab it, to steady myself and to take one last look in the direction Leo had gone, but my fingers closed on empty air. Then I heard a dull thud, the sound of my own body hitting the ground. It echoed in my ears, strangely distant, as if it had come from another century. Voices rose around me. Footsteps pounded on the floor, hurried and frantic. People were shouting, their words jumbled and sharp. I wanted to open my eyes, to tell them I was all right, that I just needed a moment to rest. But my eyelids felt as if they were sealed shut, heavy as stone, and no matter how hard I tried, I could not lift them. In the haze of unconsciousness, I saw Leo's face, smiling gently at me. My body felt light, as if it were floating, and I reached out easily, my fingers brushing his cheek. But the smile on his face slowly twisted into one of sorrow. His eyes filled with tears, and soon he was crying, a broken and helpless sound. I wanted to speak. I wanted to tell him not to be sad, that I loved him more than anything. I wanted to say, "It's all right," and "Goodbye, Leo." But no words came, only silence, and the sound of my heart whispering all the things I never got to say.